Hello and welcome back to Cyber Made Human. We're here to demystify the daunting world of tech and cyber. I'm your host, Alice Violet. I chat with industry leaders about everything from quantum computing and staying safe to spyware and artificial intelligence. In this episode, I'm joined by Nakshathra Suresh. We discuss a topic called cyber abuse and what that means about things that you're posting on apps like Strava and social media and how to stay safe online. Please make sure to subscribe if you like this show because it helps more people to discover us. Let's get started. So finally, I'm joined by Nakshathra Suresh, all the way from Sydney. Thank you so much for joining me today. We've been trying to have this conversation for about 6 months, if not longer.
It's true. Thank you, Alice, and thank you for your patience with me. It's been busy.
No, it sounds like you're working on some amazing things, which I'm excited to dive into with you. So today we're going to be discussing two angles of online safety. So this episode is going to be in two halves. And we're going to start with stranger-based and then the intersection of offline abuse in relationships. So to start with, it would be great to just kind of set the tone of what we mean by cyber abuse, as it seems like it's a term that could be interpreted in lots of different ways.
Absolutely. Cyber abuse in and of its very nature is an umbrella term. It categorizes cyberbullying, online harassment, discrimination, image-based abuse, cyber stalking, and all forms of other abuse that might occur digitally. Unfortunately, because of its umbrella term, the specific nature of certain types of cyber abuse are often definitionally missed in legislation and in policy. So that obviously has its own issues when it comes to victims and them not being able to present their cases in court, or even the jargon that is used interchangeably between stakeholders. That cyber abuse is just so broad, but it generally does mean the use of digital behaviors to intimidate, harm, or inflict some sort of pain on someone through technologies. So it is quite broad, but quite specific at the same time, and that confusion causes a lot of stress to people.
Yes, definitely. So whilst we've been kind of working out how to get this conversation started, I have been working with an open source intelligence company, also known as OSINT, which is a topic I want to dive deeper into in another episode. But it seems like there's a lot of overlap in this topic. So OSINT basically is aggregating information posted online from apps like Strava, social media, any kind of public sources like job ads, and then aggregating it and kind of making a thorough report on someone. And it feels like before I'd started working with this client, I didn't know anything about open source intelligence. And I, of course, knew that you could target people and hack them more closely if you learn information about them and could pretend to be something they were actually expecting in a phishing scam, for example. But this feels like a huge topic. And yeah, be interested to know what the overlap with kind of aggregating information is as well with cyber abuse.
Absolutely. I think you mentioned Strava, and Strava is an interesting example of an app, but generally any sort of app like a fitness tracker or something that tracks your location when you use it for exercise or mapping any part of your geographic data. Obviously, that's an offline activity that you are doing, but an online technology is using that. So there's that intersection between online and offline and that gray space in which cyber abuse can be perpetrated. So with Strava, they use heat mapping to obviously identify your run or where you've completed your exercise. And this can be publicly available information depending on your location. And I believe researchers were able to track down the specific heat map by overlaying it across Google Maps, for example, of that particular location and finding out where an individual was going on their runs. And when you think about it from a publicly available information perspective, obviously strangers can access that. And strangers, especially in this day and age, might not have the intention to harm you, but imagine that going into the hands of someone who does want to harm you, or you might have wronged someone on Strava for all that you know, that you might have commented on someone's post or we live in a day and age where even, exercise and fitness tracking apps are used as social media these days, in chat rooms, and people post it on Reddit, people post it on Facebook, like everything is interconnected. So there is that ability for you to have not even known that someone wants to know where you are or where you're running, for example, and then have that ability to find you just based on something that you might have tracked. And it's not just heat mapping, but any sort of, so I use a fitness app, and I realized that it has the option to post a photo, and you can post a photo from the gym, right? And you can post a photo, you're probably flexing, and you're like, I had a really good workout today. This is what I did. This is my upper body day. Or this is my lower body day. You don't realize how much information is actually in the back of the photo. So it could be a sign that says the company, like the gym that you're part of, including the location. And you might not see that as something that could show where you're currently working out, but all it takes is any sort of identifying information for someone to know, okay, this is where that person is at this particular point in time. And if you do use a fitness app or an exercise app regularly, and if you run the same routes or you go to the gym frequently, people are able to narrow down the time frame in which you might actually be there. So it's no longer, they have to sit and wait at the park all day. It's like they know that you're going on a routine. They know that you're running from 5 to 7 p.m. They know you're at the gym from 9 to 10 a.m. and then they can find you. Obviously, that is different when it comes to the different types of relationships that you might have. It might mean that a stranger can obviously come find you, but I would probably say that the risk is primarily more for those individuals who set their profile on public, and anyone can view that. So It's how public your profile is. If there's 4 people following you, that's different. But I'm sure there are a ton of fitness influencers out there who want to engage with their community and their followings, and everyone that has access to them and their daily lives will have access to that geolocation data. And unfortunately, they put themselves at risk by making that public. So there's a lot of, digital hygiene that needs to occur as a result of that.
And I think my mind can kind of imagine some of the risks there, but I guess not just stalking risk. There's also a risk if you live on your own and you're showing strangers that you're going for a run between 9 and 10 every day, that your house is empty. And so it could also be a risk for your home as well. Yeah. But what kind of risks are you seeing coming out of sports apps and tracking apps?
So I generally see very, very similar to you. I think there is that, obviously, the issue that your house is empty and you're not there. But I think there is a greater risk when you do post on social media or any sort of application that you are doing a particular thing repetitively. And I do believe this happened to an influencer. They posted that they used to go on their grocery shop on a Saturday, like weekly, and they would constantly post it on Instagram. And one time, someone who was just a follower, someone that they did not know, this person was a home influencer, the kind of person that you can see that they buy, all their groceries, and they do those ASMR videos where they show you how they clean their strawberries and how they pack their fridge. And they were actually confronted by one of their followers saying, I've been, following your content for some time. I knew that you'd come to this particular grocery store at this time of day, so I've just been waiting around all day for you, right? And you wouldn't think that, maybe this was in America, so like if you take a video of Walmart one time, that someone will be able to come and track and find you from that specific shot of Walmart. But if you do it repeatedly, that person is able to collect enough data about the different angles of Walmart, perhaps the shops that are right next to Walmart, identify that through Google Maps, and then you will get there. I, as someone who uses the internet, I am able to identify where someone might be just through a photo that they might have posted. And that's purely because I can type in the name of the restaurant, if it's in the background, and then it comes up on Google Maps. So if someone lives their life online, and someone who repeatedly uses these apps, posts online out of the privacy settings. Like, I genuinely think privacy settings it's a big conversation, but anyone who sets those to public, they are risking that opportunity for nefarious actors to come invade their lives. And it's purely from that personal safety lens that I look at it, and I see a lot of people that especially on Instagram when I use it, that are so open with their day-to-day life that you can see the risk, but they aren't able to see it, or they take that risk because they don't see that they're going to be a victim of anything anytime soon.
And what do you think the risks are? Because, for example, I should know about this sort of thing, given the job that I have, but I do often post coffee shops and things that I'm working from, having meetings with clients. So it's really obvious what kind of areas I'm in. If it is a day-to-day thing, it's not like it's 10 p.m. at night or something, what kind of risks are you seeing coming out of that? Obviously, you've mentioned stalking, but does that cross over into more dangerous crime? What's the kind of link that you're seeing there?
I've seen some people talk about, there's obviously an issue with identity fraud. So if anyone does, on the off chance, they're able to access any of your information and they're able to find out particular things about you, like the coffee shop that you frequent, or perhaps a bank that might be nearby that you access money from. I also see that there is a risk there of perhaps when you do post it online, it might not be in real time. So you might post it maybe later on the day that I was at a coffee shop earlier on in the day, but that does not mean that you don't frequent that coffee shop at all. It's the fact that you do means that someone is able to use that information to inform more about your identity. Sometimes I feel like people are able to discern between the more routine when I say people, I mean nefarious actors. Some people are able to discern between like what is a one-off and what is a more routine type of activity for you. And that might be something that they can use against you. I would say this affects more vulnerable demographics though. So if you look at senior citizens, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, these are all people who have very poor digital literacy. So they could get on the phone with someone and that person could be like, I know that you have, accessed some money from this bank that is right next to your coffee shop. And they're like, oh, how do you know so much about me? Clearly you must be in a position of authority that you know so much about me, and they could say they're calling from the tax office, or they could say that they're calling from another digital regulatory authority or something that these people feel obligated to respond to. And as such, by opening and engaging in that dialogue, they are actually giving away more of their information because that trust has already been cemented that, hey, you already know all this stuff about me. Okay, I'm going to tell you, I don't know, my top 3 security passwords. What's the street that I lived on? What was my first pet's name? What was my mother's maiden name? All of that is just, it comes from a place of digital trust. And if you are opening up a world of information for people who do follow you or your content, that is information that they're able to discern just by you posting publicly. Like, we no longer live in an age where we have to ask questions in order to find the answers. People can just go on your profile and find that out anyways.
That's a very interesting point there. People can find things out about you without even having to ask. So you're a teaching fellow at the moment, hoping to become a lecturer. And is that in cyber criminology, did you say?
Yes.
So what kind of, you've mentioned here that it's kind of digital literacy that people are taking advantage of with vulnerable people. So there seems to be a big correlation between offline, well, it's not even offline, it's aggregating information from online sources and using it for fraud. Is that kind of the main type of crime that you're seeing online?
Probably not the main form that I would say. I think right now the main form of stranger-based cyber abuse that I see is those associated with deepfakes. So deepfake image-based abuse is probably the biggest one. It's outside of geolocation data, obviously, but it is essentially anyone who posts a photo of themselves online they are at risk and more susceptible to having that being doctored and used in videos where people aren't able to identify whether this is something created by artificial intelligence or whether it's real, to the point where that person themselves probably can't identify whether it's real or not, because it's
wow.
it is so real. So part of the work that I do at university is so at my university there's a lot of conversation around digital trust and artificial intelligence. So I, in my capacity as the co-founder of Eiris, but also with all the different affiliations that I hold, I always talk about the psychosocial effects of interacting with new and emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence. So the biggest risk that I see is the fact that people don't have digital literacy that is translated effectively to them. There's all these conversations happening at a higher level, at the academic level, at a policy, regulatory, governmental level, even at the international level, but that's not translated down to the ultimate end user, who is the consumer of the application themselves, which means that they are actually putting themselves at more risk because they just want to use the app without actually considering the pros and cons of it. And all this information is out there from academics, but I'm not sure about you, but I know the people in my life who are average everyday consumers. They're not going to wake up every day and be like, oh, look at this amazing organization. They've just posted a 10-page research report on this particular thing. I'm going to sit and read that whole thing, and whether that influences my opinion of Facebook. I'm going to sit there and I'm going to consider whether I'm going to use Facebook. So for me, I was like, there needs to be some sort of information distilling down to that ultimate end user that is digestible, accessible, and easy for them to comprehend, which puts the choice back in the user's hands and ultimately empowers them. And when I float this idea with my students, they could not be happier because, again, as a child, you are constantly being told what to do and what not to do. And you're for 17 and 18, you don't have the autonomy of an adult just yet. But they have experienced a whole slew of cyber issues growing up in high school. And when you turn 18, you're suddenly an adult, and all the issues that you have experienced as a child fade away, and you're an adult now. You have to deal with the world and all the risks that come with cyber on your own, and there's no support services that are available to you in an accessible way that give you the opportunity to be like, okay, I no longer want to use Snapchat, or I no longer want to use TikTok, or I no longer want to use ChatGPT for this particular way because I know that this is what it does. So I think that empowering choice is really important.
Definitely. Well, I have so many questions based on what you just said. But I think I'm going to start with children. You talk about in childhood, you're told what you can and can't do. And if you've got parents who aren't digitally literate and don't necessarily know what the pros and cons of these apps are, or even what you're doing on them, if you do get to an age where you suddenly think, I wish I hadn't posted all this stuff on Snapchat or whatever the app was, especially with things like Snapchat where I believe it disappears, is there a way that you can go back and cleanse your data or not?
As a parent or as a child?
As a child, if you came to the realization you suddenly have educated yourself on the risk, is there a way you can go back and remove some of your digital footprint or not?
At this stage, I don't think so. I don't think Snapchat has the ability to do so. I do believe in Australia, at least, if someone else has posted something of you online, the e-safety commissioner here has the ability to direct them to take it down.
Okay.
So there is that option there. I would probably, for me, like on Snapchat, so I use Snapchat growing up as well, and I've had two different Snapchat accounts. So one when I was younger and I was below the age of 18, and then one I still have, I should say, over the age of 18. And it's very similar to Snap. It was very similar to this app called Kik as well. Where you used to be able to chat to random strangers and send photos or like text and all sorts of things in tiny little forum threads. So Kik was one where you could actually, I'm not sure how reliable it was, but Kik, I think, has been put on blast now, very similar to Omegle with the enforcement of child safety. But essentially, Kik had an option to like reset your account. Like you could like erase all your content and start again, or like create a new profile. And I remember I wanted to erase my entire profile and start again. So I did do that, but I'm not sure whether that data was entirely erased from the back end of the system or it just presented that way for me because they wanted to keep me on the application. It's the same way that I feel that dating apps keep you in the algorithm of like continuing to stay on the app because they ask you can reset all your likes. And it's kind of like a fresh start. I believe it's the same thing. Like, I don't think apps entirely delete all your data. I think they have the liberty to do so, but they don't want to because data is money for them.
Just interrupting the conversation with Nakshathra to remind you that I have a content marketing agency called Alice Violet Creative, specialising in complex brands. We primarily work with tech and cyber brands, enabling them to communicate their offering through beautiful storytelling in the form of photography, video, and of course, podcasts. We also offer strategy and full social media management. So if you're looking for those services, do make sure to get in touch. Back to the show. I mean, I think children are more digitally literate these days, but for those who aren't, you know, if you do get to an age where you think, God, I wish I hadn't posted all that information about myself, especially if you did want to get into a job with government or some kind of role that you just wish that information didn't exist about you, I think there should be an option from platforms to go back and remove everything from in the cloud, the backups. But I think you're right. They're giving you access to these apps for free because they want that data that they're going to use in various different ways. So they're unlikely to do that. You mentioned earlier about artificial intelligence and some of the risks there. So it'd be great to just understand what the risks with that are.
Sure. So artificial intelligence in general, the conversation about AI safety, people talk about it from a technical lens, and people talk about all the different models and everything that is used there and all the biases. And it's always talking about these data scientists, engineers, and everyone who's actually able to build the solutions and talking about all the considerations that they might have prior to building the system. When I talk about AI safety as a criminologist and study of why crime occurs, right? And why does criminal activity occur in certain locations, etc. Criminal justice is what failures exist in the criminal justice system and how certain demographics within the legal system are often denied justice as a result of it. So I apply both criminology and criminal justice when it comes to AI safety. And I always think about the psychosocial effects of these technical solutions on the ultimate end user. And technical solutions often, if you look at startups, if you look at businesses, if you look at all the major organizations who are embedding artificial intelligence into their applications, oftentimes they're obviously going to talk about the positives of using artificial intelligence. It's going to streamline your work. You're going to get better outcomes. You're going to get XYZ as a result of it in revenue. You're able to appease all your customer demographics because you've saved them 15% of their work time as a result in one day. But the other issues that come as associated with that is the reliance on the artificial intelligence system as a sentient being. And often when you think about why crime occurs or criminal activity occurs or any sort of harmful behavior occurs is an over-reliance on any particular type of vice. And I actually think some artificial intelligence systems are now being used as a vice for people to not be able to rely on their own cognitive systems. So they pass it on to AI. And then there becomes an over-reliance with that they often establish a relationship with the artificial intelligence system that causes them to go into psychological overdrive or underdrive, right? So, for example, I think there was a man in Berlin who was obsessed with climate change and was talking to an AI chatbot that basically encouraged him to commit suicide for his cause.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was something that, obviously sent shockwaves within the AI community because that is a chatbot that was not intended to look at some, like, it was not intended to obviously provoke anyone to commit suicide, but obviously as a result of not considering the psychological implications of someone using a chatbot, they've replaced that chatbot. Previously, we had customer service representatives on a chatbot, right? Now everyone is using a chatbot and we don't even know if it's a human on the other end. We just assume that, it is, but it could be an AI that has just been prompt engineered to the point where it sounds like a human, that people who may not have those existing good relationships with humans in their life have an over-reliance, and it becomes their vice. They go home and they develop these intimate relationships with these tools without realizing that these tools are just, like I said, prompt engineered by a whole bunch of data scientists, engineers, software developers that don't think of the ultimate end user and how this can negatively affect them. And obviously, I'm not blaming businesses in any way for it, but I do think there needs to be that consideration when you are creating a product and a continuous feedback cycle with your ultimate end user, whether that means constantly checking in with, your top 10% of users and asking them what issues that they've seen when it comes to their mental health and their well-being. And an article recently came out, and we actually covered it in our newsletter for Eiris, talking about how patriarchal ChatGPT is. And that's a safety issue yet again, because someone posted 2 feedback cycles with different names like John and Jane. And John actually got more positive feedback, even though it was the exact same thing. John actually got more positive feedback and an encouragement for a promotion. And Jane actually got more negative feedback just because her name was Jane, even though they were fictional, and asked to, work and improve and do more collaborative thinking and learning with their teammates just because there was gender associated with it. And I don't think software developers or people who create artificial intelligence systems really consider these psychological impacts or these social impacts for the ultimate end user. And obviously, different marginalized communities are affected in different ways as a result, because I just talked about gender, but race plays a huge deal. If that name, Jane, was ethnically another name, if it was my name, for example, very different to your name, Alice, like the output would be completely different.
I'm rereading Sapiens at the moment, which is fantastic.
Oh, I love Sapiens.
Yeah, it's my second time reading it. And at the moment, it's talking about how a lot of culture is imagined and how money is imagined. And, culture, countries, everything is imagined in the human brain. And it's only that we've done it collectively that we now think of it as real. But so much of it is an abstract concept. And so what it was making me think, as you were saying that, when you apply that to AI, how can AI discern what we have created in our imagined mind? Of course, it's going to be full of bias because what we've created is completely biased. And so if it's mirroring reality, it kind of makes me feel like that's such a enormous hurdle to overcome, because especially if it's one culture that's created the AI, not only is that culture majorly biased, it's just kind of weighted in a certain way, as you've described with gender and race there. So I'd love to maybe see if the author of that book has kind of updated anything with the emergence of ChatGPT, because that's very interesting intersection of topics there. And also what you made me think of there with AI is that I actually know a few people who use ChatGPT as if it's a therapist, and it's not. And there's things like there are AI therapists that you can get, but they'll actively say, I prefer talking to ChatGPT because it's not a real person. So I can admit my deepest, darkest secrets to it, or, give names of my friends I'm having an issue with, because it's not a person I'm having to admit it to, and it will come back with a response. And I think that's really dangerous territory, because as you say, you're switching off your own cognitive abilities there and relying on a data set to give you the right answer to a really emotional situation, which can lead to quite sad results, as you mentioned with the person from Berlin.
Absolutely. And it's not just AI chatbots or ChatGPT. Obviously, I think there's Replica AI, and I think there are a couple of other artificial intelligence companies that now replicate human companionship. So you can actually use dating app chatbots. Like you can sign up to dating apps where you're talking to an artificially intelligent chatbot. But for people who don't have success on traditional dating apps, they're able to use this and actually gain success because that chatbot won't reject them. And unfortunately, this has led to a rise, I would say, in involuntary celibate culture or incel culture, where there are people who obviously have their own, the gender disparities there, obviously with men and women. It's primarily men who experience a lot of rejection on these traditional dating apps, then go to these AI chatbots, say whatever they want, and that chatbot is going to agree with it or take it, per se. And then they apply that to their real interactions with a woman because they're not able to, again, differentiate between what is real and what is not. And that companionship aspect is just, it's very scary to me. It's very scary that we use AI therapists and AI chatbots for mental health, but also to replace any form of human connection. I do caveat this with saying that I know that a lot of people do struggle, and those people who aren't able to actually have or forge like relationships with other human beings, or they don't have a community or a support system that they're able to reach out to, I do understand. But I also realize that there is massive risk with being completely reliant on a piece of technology which is going to agree with every single thing that you say, because you could be saying the most horrendous things and then it's not just you log off or you close the app. You will eventually have to go and talk to another human being at some point in your day to day, and you're going to just transfer whatever you've been talking to this AI chatbot to, and everything that was normalized into an actual conversation with someone else. And that is really harmful. But is there a perceived element of safety for the conversations we have online as well? Would it be different if that person was talking to an AI chatbot and that AI chatbot went and agreed with everything that they said, and then they jumped on Facebook or Instagram or X and then proceeded to think that they, whatever they were saying was correct, and then they just go on a rampage and go and target every woman that might argue with them in the comments? What sort of language do you use there?
With algorithms as well, you mentioned X, I think X has become incredibly right-wing and very extremist and very kind of clickbaity cesspit of a platform. And there's also platforms like, I think Donald Trump's got his own platform because he's been removed from X, and there's a lot of very problematic people who have their own private membership areas. And I'm just completely assuming, but if to begin with, a lot of those accounts are bots and they are affirming everything that the person who's running them saying, that is incredibly dangerous territory. And I mean, another book that I've read recently is The Brain by David Eagleman. It talks about how susceptible human beings are to extremism, which is why we've seen so many horrendous things in our history and current world, because it's very easy for people to suddenly become very right-wing or very left-wing based on what they're consuming. And with algorithms and AI, that is just going to accelerate that, especially for someone who doesn't actually go outside and have somebody disagree with them, like you said. That I think chronically online is another topic I think I'd love to dive into.
Thanks for listening to this episode, guys. In the next episode, we're going to be diving more into spyware and how things like cat cams, baby cams, and cloud services can be used to spy on people, maybe in domestic relationships. And this is less stranger-based violence and more to do with people that you know. So do make sure to listen to that episode. And if you enjoyed this one, make sure to subscribe. Thanks, guys.